Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Are you feeling alive this morning? Yeah, that's what I like to hear. Good thing the Lord makes dead things come alive. Amen. My name is Kylea, and I'm on purpose here at Forward Point. We believe you were born on purpose for purpose, and we want to be a part of that story any way we can. If you are new to Forward Point, we want to connect with you. Text WELCOME to 315-883-2213, and we want to send you a little gift. You can also connect with us through our best online experience at forwardpoint.online.church and hit the button that says connect. I'm already out of breath. Also, into the months of July and August, our Sundays become fun days. Last week was the very first of our Sunday fun days. Our crew made a sick video to give you a recap on what went down. Check it out. As I said before, every July and August, our Sundays become fun days. We've extended it this year into the evenings from 4 to 7. We'll be hosting a variety of food trucks at our office parking lot. If you want to find out who's coming and when, you could check out on our Facebook page at Forward Point. Tonight, Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory, as well as PB&J Lunchbox, and the Angry Pig Barbecue will be there. Also, two more notes. New Hope is doing a fundraiser. New Hope is an organization that supports new life. You can pick up one of the baby bottles at the Welcome Center or donate online, and all the information should be up at that welcome table. Also, last note before we continue on with our gathering, if you came prepared to give to Forward Point, you can do that in 3-4-ish ways. You can give in person through the Joy Box in the back. You can also give online, forwardpoint.online.church, and hit the donate button, I believe. You can also text any amount to 84321. And the fourth way is to download the Church Center app. I'm sure if you find Jimmy, he'll give you all the details on that. With all that being said, we'd like to continue on with our gathering.
grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. I can hear ya. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. This is amazing grace. This is amazing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. All that you've done for me. Oh, hear me. Praise the Lord, amen, this morning. His grace is amazing, church. Not bad for some of these youth kids now on the band here. Come on. We love seeing God just move and purpose in our lives, constantly doing a work inside us. The head there once was crowned with thorns, is crowned with glory now. The Savior knelt to wash our feet. Now at his feet we bow. Let's sing that again. The head. The head there once was crowned with thorns, is crowned with glory now. The Savior knelt to wash our feet. Now at his feet we bow. The one who wore our sin and shame, now robed in majesty. The radiance of perfect love now shines for all to see. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Our name, your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. The fear that held us now gives way to him who is our peace. His final breath upon the cross is now alive in me. Your name is
resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King, let me hear you, is resurrected by your Spirit. By your Spirit I'm alive from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. 'Cause in your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King, one more time, is resurrected by your Spirit. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. He's resurrecting me. He's resurrecting me. He's resurrecting me. The tomb of soldiers watched in vain was borrowed for 3 days. His body there would not remain. All God has wrought the grave. All God has wrought the grave. 1, 2, 3. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ. Sing it again. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Oh, your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ. By your Spirit, by your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King, He's resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is by your Spirit. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come to life to declare your victory. The resurrected King, one more time, is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come to life to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. Is resurrecting me. He's resurrecting me. It's resurrection me. We just praise you, Lord Jesus. Thank you, God.
I don't know about you, man. It's just need a resurrecting in my own spirit. Father, I just pray for a refresh and renewal inside us. I pray the words that come out of our mouths this morning would take hold. They would just go into good soil. Jesus said, what you bind on earth, you can bind in heaven, and what you loose will be loose in heaven. It's not about us trying to remove ourselves from this world. It's about bringing heaven to where we are. That doesn't mean crime and wars will stop and violence will stop. But the presence of God goes wherever we go if it's inside us.
Spirit of the Lord. For the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. We believe that. A miracle can happen now. For the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. Praise. Spirit of the Lord is here this morning. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Lord. Just stand here in this moment, Lord. Give everything all over to you, Lord. Our fears, our insecurities, our anxieties, Lord. Just lay it all at your feet. Lay it all on you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord.
Come out of sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken-hearted, the rescue begin. Come find your mercy, oh sinner, come kneel. And earth has no sorrow that heaven can heal. 'Cause earth has no sorrow that heaven can heal. Sing with us. Oh, lay down your burdens, lay down your shame, and all who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. There's hope. There's hope for the hopeless and all those who stray. Come sit at the table, come taste the grace. There's rest for the weary, rest that endures. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can cure. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are, come as you are. Fall in His arms, come as you are. Say that again. Come as you are, come as you are. Fall in His arms, come as you are. There's joy. There's joy for the morning. Oh, sinner, be still 'cause earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down. So lay down your burdens. Lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. The world's overcome. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart. Come as you are. Come as you are. All is lost. Come as you are. Come as you are. Come as you are. All is lost. Come as you are. Thank you, God. Jesus. You know, sometimes you just throw out those prayers and sometimes you wonder where they're going. And then other times it's like when you're just like not expecting it, God just reveals his amazing presence to you. I had one of those unique stories. Aubrey, can you play a little strings? I'm gonna get messed up if I can't tell this story straight and play keys. You gonna play a little keys, Aubrey? Guys, you're not doing too bad on our first time, right? Come on keys. Yeah. Yeah, there you go, Aubrey. Do something creative, do something awesome. Just want to take a second here. I had a very cool experience this week. One of those things, again, hey, we pray, we love people, we want to see God move, but then sometimes you have that moment where it's like, you literally just see God at work, and you're like, there's no way. And God's been just showing me this week how much he can move in our lives through the pain, through the suffering. I'm sure if we had a show of hands, we wouldn't have enough hands to raise our hands saying, have we endured some suffering? Have we endured some hardships in this last couple months, last couple years? Maybe a lifetime of hardships and suffering. And we pray and we ask God to move, and yet we don't see it sometimes. Because we don't see the full picture, because his ways are so much higher than our ways, and we just sometimes get really discouraged. I talk to people during the week and they're discouraged. And yet, sometimes out of nowhere, God just shows up. One person, I'll keep these people nameless, they don't care, but anyway, it's so awesome. But one person's gone through a lot of very hardships. Started this relationship with God again. And as God's moving in his heart, now he's sharing the goodness to his friends. There's a friend of his that's very special to him, and he said, Stephen, if anyone out there, I would love to see this person just know that God loves them, know that God cares. They've gone through so much. They've lost parents too. They've gone through hardships like something fierce. As you know, I sell a lot of real estate, and I just asked God to come into the midst of all what's going on. Well, what happened this week, I got asked to list someone's home for this girl who has been fighting for 10 years to get this home back. It had major legal issues with extended family and all that, and she's exhausted. Well, this friend who went through brokenness called this other friend, says, you should call Stephen. She called me. I went out there. It was great. Don't know if anyone wants to buy the home or not. But in turn, just hearing her story and everything, well, I never even asked her last name. Don't worry, she's not like my sister or something like that. But anyway, I didn't ask her last name. But then all of a sudden, I looked it up the day I was about to list the home,
And it's so funny. I have someone else with that same last name I'm representing right now. I mean, what's the chances? It's not a normal last name, and just the chances? So then in turn, I called up the other person. I said, I'm not trying to be a snoop or a creep, but is this person related to you? Do you know them? And they said, yes. I said, who is this person? He said, Stephen, it's my stepdaughter. I've been looking for her. I said, I would love to have a relationship with her again. It's been cut off for years. I said, oh my goodness, I can't believe this. She's like, I have photos of her childhood and everything. I haven't been able to get to her because we're selling the house right now. So then I have to make the call back to this person. And I said, do you know so-and-so? She's like, oh my goodness, I have gone to that home before and I wanted to have the courage to knock, and sometimes it's been hard because of the hardships in the past. And she was amazing. I said, she wants to get to know you again. And I mean, just tears are welling in her eyes. I said, now why is it that she has so much stuff? Were you that close? She has baby photos, clothing, all this stuff. And then she told me just something so amazing. She's like, Stephen, that other house you're selling, that's my childhood home. That's where I grew up. And it was like all these dots connected were people who were, again, not seeing God, maybe so hurt. Who knows how many years went by. But through someone's hurt, but asking God to move, showed up for another person. That through that now is getting this literally, not just an inkling, a dive bomb of the presence of God. And all of a sudden, families connected. Unity is coming back. Not to mention, we sold the house literally in less than like 30 seconds. Someone says, I've been waiting for this house. They said, I will pay more than you would ever list it for. And it's just all of a sudden she realizes that the God she felt was so far away, so distant from her, literally just met her in her living room, literally just entered in her space and says, I'm coming after you. You can run, but you can't hide. I love you. I love you just the way you are. I don't understand, church, why sometimes the hurt that we go through, some of the pain we go through. Those are the mysteries of God. But what I can tell you is that his love reaches us to the highest mountains, to the bottom of the seas, to as far as expanse from the east to the west. He can literally come into our space. And he asks us to come, not all cleaned up, not all showered, not all pretty. I did get a nice haircut this week, but no, not all good and all that. Come as you are. Whatever the way you are. All colors, all backgrounds, all walks of life. This is the God who we serve. He knows us by name, and he wants to literally have a relationship with you that's beyond anything we could ever hope or experience. He is such a good Father. And I just pray today, literally, the presence of God would flow over us. I'm going to sing this bridge again here. And I want you to think about it. To you right now, what does it coming as you are look like? Come as you are. Come as you are. Let him just invade your space today, church. Fall in his arms. Come as you are. Just worship him. Come as you are. I come as I am. Come as you are. All in his arms. Come as you are. Let's just sing that again. Come as you are. Come as you are. Fall in his arms. Come as you are.
church. How we doing? Good morning, good morning. Those joining us online, in person, glad that you could be here with us. How many here would consider themselves a loyal person? You think, yeah, I'm a loyal person, maybe even sometimes to a fault, maybe I'm loyal to people, okay? How many people would say, you know, we have a real loyalty problem going on in the world today, right? So sometimes people, you know, let me down. I can't really count on them. I really know. Anybody agree there with that statement? We got a loyalty problem? Yeah. Well, here's a little strange. The problem with loyalty therein lies, you know, everyone raises their hand, yeah, I'm a loyal person, and everyone raises their hand, yeah, we have a loyalty problem. So either all the unloyal people are at the other churches down the street, or you know, there's a little bit of a disconnect between what loyalty is and means. In 8th grade, it was kind of the heart of my rebellious years as a human being, and about a quarter of the school year into my 8th grade year, my parents sent me to Faith Heritage School. I had been going to a small private school out in Baldwinsville called Faith Baptist Academy. Now it's called Baldwinsville Academy. And as I was reflecting on the story, I went back to my yearbook to check it out, and I realized that nowhere in the yearbook is there any reference to me. Right? They take pictures on like the first day of school, so my picture wasn't in there. But I didn't even get like an asterisk mark, like not pictured as Jimmy Doyle. Right? I was there 3/4 of the year. I feel like that deserves some kind of recognition. And somehow I played on the basketball team, but I must have missed picture day because on the modified basketball team page, I wasn't even there or listed on the team. And I began to think, man, I really got kind of felt like my life erased that 8th grade year. I couldn't find a picture of me in 8th grade year. I thought I'd show you. This is a picture of me in my 9th grade year. We'll see if it comes up here. This is the closest I could come to my. Here it is. Can you see anybody see me? Let me see if I can help you out here. I'll do a little of this. See this guy over here? Yeah, you might not recognize me because you can see my entire face there. That was me in 9th grade year. This is also my picture in my 9th grade year. So I finally made it into the yearbook. But the year before, again, kind of coming out of this or really right in the middle of this very rebellious time of my life and at this new school, it's kind of awkward being the new guy in a school. It's one thing to start off and be the new guy, and you get a kind of chance to make friends with everybody, but to come in kind of a quarter of the way in after all the groups have kind of formed, and you know the people who have known each other for years have already kind of invited the new people in, and I come in and kind of the new guy. But there was this one group of guys that were super kind and super sweet, and they invited me into their friend group, right? And at the time, you know, I was really appreciative of that, but really my mind was just kind of survival, do whatever I had to fit in. All I really cared about is me and my feelings. And one of the gentlemen in this friend group, his name was Phil. Phil Holiday was kind of the very pixelated version of him there. That's not really what he looked like. His face did not have all those spots on him, but he was kind of the all-around athlete guy, right? He in senior year voted most athletic and likely to become a sports all-star, and he kind of has, the word on the street was the rugged good looks, I guess, right? I don't really know how to judge other guys' looks, but that was the word, is he's kind of the all-around, just kind of handsome fellow, and he kind of had this, you know how in the movies there's always like the sports jock guy, the famous one who has kind of got a thing for the pretty girl, right? Well, this was the pretty girl in our 8th grade class, right? And I, amongst everyone else, I also noticed how pretty this young girl was. Her name was Tiffany, and Tiffany was this tall, blonde hair. She had the bangs that kind of did the big old thing, and the big poofy hair that was big back in those days. And I know there's just something about Tiffany that I really liked. And in class, I would kind of catch her eyes, from across the desk there. And you do that whole little smile, flirtatious thing from across the room without really any regard to the fact that Phil, one of these guys who kind of accepted me into this friend group, it was kind of predestined to be dating Tiffany. But to me, it didn't really matter, right? I liked her, so I was going to kind of pursue things. And we were, I remember one day in between classes, I finally worked up the nerve to talk to her. And, again, without my parents knowing, because my parents, didn't want me to go anywhere near relationships ever again in my life as a result of some of the things I had come out of. And her last name was Babiar, so her locker was just a few lockers away from mine. So this one day I worked up the courage and I said, Tiffany, will you go out with me? And she did, the cutest little thing. She was like, okay, but as long as if we break up, we still remain friends, right? Oh, we're so cute. Who cares about that? Who has time to think about tomorrow? We have to live in the moment today, right? And we started this kind of relationship. And again, I didn't even really think about Phil. And then gradually word got around to Phil. And I kind of saw the look in Phil's eyes where he was like this pain, And then it's hard, I know, 8th grade, and there's all sorts of things we're going to experience in life, and it's hard to imagine. But in that moment, it was like, I had betrayed my best friend. If you've ever seen the movie Braveheart, it's like the scene where he's betrayed by Robert the Bruce, right? He thinks that they're meeting to set up terms to join together, and it winds up being an ambush. And he says to his father, he's like, I betrayed him. You should have seen the look on his face. And the thought went into my mind all for about a second that I betrayed him, and I just went along enjoying my newfound relationship with Tiffany. It was kind of a funny relationship because she was taller than I was, and which most people were, but she was really tall, and so she was a lot taller than I was, but I was not one probably that you would define as being loyal in that season. And what we've been doing is over the past couple of weeks is we've been talking about these virtues that maybe we've lost in our life, right? As we look around and we kind of see this tailspin world going off into all sorts of craziness, and we're doing things to ourselves, and we're doing things that, they're going to look back on and say, what were they thinking? And I wonder if it has something to do with the fact that we've lost some virtues, some guideposts, some motivators that God says, if you have these in your life, then all the other questions about race and all the other questions about monuments and all these other things, how you live your life, will work themselves out if you align your life according to these lost virtues. And we kicked off our series talking about the lost virtue of honor. I don't know how many times I'm going to trip on that. The lost virtue of honor. Right, Jesus was on this kind of tour doing all sorts of miracles, and after this year-long tour, he comes to his hometown where everybody kind of knows him and remembers him growing up, and as a result of their lack of faith and honor, he's unable to do any miracles there. It's not that he didn't want to do miracles. It's not that he refused to because, they were throwing him shade, so he was going to throw shade back at him. But he physically could not do miracles as a result of the way they treated him. And we looked at, there's 3 main areas that God has called us to show honor in our life. First is our parents, right? And again, honoring doesn't mean that we necessarily have to do exactly what they say, but honoring means that we're going to esteem and we're going to value and we're going to help promote and lift them up. We have to honor our parents. We looked at, God has called us to honor the government, to honor the ordained, the leadership that has been placed around us. And despite the fact that sometimes, and we see it now probably more than I've ever seen in my life, and maybe since the civil rights, is this kind of growing uprise of people refusing to show honor to the government. And this last area we looked at is that God has called us to honor the church leadership. That God has put people in place. And if this is a place where, you've called your home and you say, I want to be part of Forward Point, then a part of that is submitting to a level of leadership that God has put in place here, and we're to show honor. And we dishonor by maybe going out, and if we talk behind backs, or, we think we don't like this, and this is not going the way that I wanted, and those are all forms of dishonor. We're called to honor our church leadership. And then last week we talked about this idea of purity, right? And purity is this idea that, God has set up a standard by which we're called to live. And he said, he made it clear the world is going to live one way, right? They're going to do what they're going to choose to do. And in fact, they're going to continue to get worse and worse. They're going to continue to choose to go away from God, and the things that they did in one generation in moderation is going to become the norm and even be done in excess in the next generation. And it's not acceptable just to kind of maintain this gap where we're just a little bit, with a distance, but we're kind of going in the same direction. But the call of purity actually points us to go towards God in the opposite direction and to expand this gap and to become more and more like Jesus. So the picture becomes more and more obvious between what the world looks like and what the followers of Jesus look like. And we're called to this lifestyle of purity, to become more like Jesus. And today we want to talk about this idea of loyalty, right? Because we already established that there's kind of a disconnect between what we consider in ourselves as being loyal and maybe the state of loyalty in the world today. So just as a quick point of reference, this is real simple, just the definition of loyalty, right? Loyalty is simply just giving or showing firm and constant support or allegiance to a person or institution. Right, the first thing that came to my mind for me is the Pledge of Allegiance, right? From the first day I can remember being in school, we would, at the beginning of the morning, there was the flag. We would stand up, we put our hand on our heart, and we would recite these words showing allegiance to this flag and what the flag represented in the United States. And I began to think, you know what, man, I was really extremely loyal back there in 8th grade, right? Loyal to myself. Right, loyal to the things that I wanted, and that was what drove me and motivated me and caused me to really abandon any thought of how would my decisions and my actions would affect my friends. There's other areas that we can be loyal to, right? We can be loyal to a brand, right? Anybody know someone who's crazy loyal about Apple, huh? Anybody? Right? You even come on my block with anything other than an Apple phone, and I send my Siri out. I got a new guard dog Siri that I send after you, right? Nothing frustrates me more than putting together a group text message, and then there's that one person that doesn't have an iPhone, and my conversation turns green, right? Nothing frustrates me more than having a group conversation that's green, because then every single response and like and heart and laugh comes back as this big message, right? I'm fanatical. I'm loyal when it comes to Apple. There's other electronic devices that are cool and fancy, but I refuse. I don't even want to be tempted to go anywhere outside of my Apple bubble because I'm loyal. Sometimes we experience people who are super loyal to things like our country and maybe to an extreme, right? That we would call a nationalist, where they would say maybe they would follow God or not, but more than anything else, they put their hope and their trust in the country and the government and what it means to be a citizen. Maybe you put your loyalty in an organization. There's going to be, the Black Lives Matter, or there's the All Lives Matter, and you find yourself, man, picking a side, and you're going to be loyal to your side no matter what kind of arguments or pushback that you get. And then as that pushback comes, you're going to fight to the end to show how your loyalty is proven true. Do I kneel during the national anthem or don't I kneel? And I'm going to pick my side. I'm going to be loyal because that's where I'm going to lay my claims. Am I a Democrat or am I a Republican? And I'm going to be loyal no matter what. No matter what the person in office does, I'm going to choose to be loyal without condition, to show my allegiance, to show my support to this person or this institution. And maybe it's not that we have a loyalty problem, but we have a who we put our loyalty in problem. Today we're going to look at this character, kind of a lesser known character, but as soon as I thought about this idea of loyalty, his name came to mind. His name is Jonathan. He's from the Old Testament. I encourage you to read his story. It's found in 1st and 2nd Samuel. It's a great read. Or there's also this really good book that I found by Francine Rivers, where she does kind of this fictional history, biblical history about the life of Jonathan. And I'm sure there's a Christian bookstore here locally that would carry it or get it for you. If only we could find one down the street. But read and get a big picture of the entire life of Jonathan. But I'm going to give you just a big kind of overview of the background to Jonathan and where he enters into biblical history. Now, the people of Israel, the children of God, the Jews, they had kind of come out of Egypt and out of slavery and had been delivered. And during that time, they went through generations of being overseen by prophets of God. The prophets of God kind of acted as their judges and would reveal to the people what God wanted out of their lives. And probably in that culture, they would be known as seers, right? They would call them as seers, and we use the word prophet looking back, but they would probably say the seer like Samuel and these other ones that would come up. And something happened to the people of God where they began to lose value in the relationship that they had with God. Right, a relationship where they could hear directly through the voice of this man exactly what God was saying. And they began to look around at all the people in the other lands around them. And they said, they have kings and they have these rulers and we want to be like them. So God, Samuel, tell God, we want a king. This whole relationship thing that we got going through you to God, I mean, it's nice, it's fancy, but it's kind of peculiar. Right, despite being called to be a peculiar people, they wanted to look like everyone else and to look like everyone else. So finally God relented and he chooses to give them a king. And he chooses the first king is kind of the obvious pick. His name was Saul, and Saul was kind of the head and shoulders above every other person look, right? Literally, the Bible says he was head and shoulders above everyone else in the way that he looked. And at first, he didn't really want the job. He was kind of hiding when it was his time to be anointed as king. But gradually, he took over as the role of king, and his eldest son was Jonathan. And Jonathan finds himself in this, newly formed monarchy there in Israel, where he's now the prince of this group of people separated by tribes and hoping that this idea of a king will now bring these separate tribes together and they can be one nation and they're going to be able to defeat their enemies. Despite the warnings of what a king would mean for them and what a king would do to them, they plot on and they choose to have a king instead of God. And Jonathan is here as the prince with a heart above everything else to honor God. His heart is that at any moment he can push his father towards being more like God, and eventually he would develop this relationship with a friend. His friend would become David, and he would choose to, at all costs, as David rises on the scene and begins to take over as being God's anointed one, he would choose to say, as honoring God, I'm going to honor my friendship with David, despite the way my father wants to kill him and the way that my father is acting and becoming mad and going after David. And he's really torn between these relationships, and he's torn between the position that he holds himself. And despite all of the different relational issues he finds himself in the middle of, he finds a way to be loyal. Loyal to his dad, loyal to his God, and loyal to his friend David. So we want to jump into the life of Jonathan here. And then the first kind of point that I saw in the life of Jonathan was this idea that loyalty looks up when everyone else is looking around. Early on in the setup of the kingdom, as Saul is taking over as king, they're on this kind of purge to try to rid the Philistines out of their land. And they're kind of set up and ready to, they're camping and they're afraid of the Philistines because the Philistines have advanced technology and iron and the Israelites don't. The only way that they can get sharp tools to work with is they have to go to the Philistines and the Philistines sharpen them for them. And they're on the verge of war, and this happens. It says in 1 Samuel, it says, but the people wouldn't listen to Samuel. No, they said, we will have a king to rule us. Then we'll be just like all the other nations. Our king will rule us and lead us and fight our battles. Right? This is kind of back what I was talking about. I apologize, but this is the people of God looking around instead of looking up to God. Right? Loyalty decides that I'm going to look at God and choose to follow God despite what everyone else around me is doing. Despite that all the nations around us have a king and it looks cool, it looks fancy, we're going to choose to continue to honor God and the design that God has for us. As a father, I have these little people who are kind of always looking up to me and almost to a detriment, right? Because as soon as I put something out of, I pull something out of the fridge or I begin to eat something from a cupboard, little Litly kind of goes like this, puts her hands up and she says, right? Like she wants some. She wants whatever I'm eating. And sometimes, that works out really well for her, and sometimes I'm eating something really gross and it doesn't work out so well for her. I just started adding Metamucil into my daily fiber, daily intake. If you're old like me now, you know what Metamucil is, right? If you need to increase your fiber intake. But the thing about Metamucil is you mix it together and it looks like this really cool orange, right? So as soon as Litly sees it, she's like, like she wants a sip, right? And as soon as I give it to her, she spits it out all over me. And that's what, despite sometimes the result or what we think, there's this gaze that my children have when they're always looking up at me and wanting to do whatever that I do. And it's this loyalty. Like my kids will do anything that I ask them to do. Sometimes they try to be, a little sassy and talk back to me. But because their gaze is constantly looking up at me, they're seeing what I'm doing and they're wanting to be involved with where I'm going. And the moment my kids take their eyes and start looking around, right? When Litly's trying to eat and walk and she's looking backwards at the same time, she's running to more walls than I think I can keep track of. And even if you see her now, you see she's got like scrapes all over her nose and her lip because she's run into something. Because she took her eyes off of me and starts looking all around. Loyalty looks up when everyone else is looking around. The second thing I saw is this idea that we're going to get to. Loyalty steps out when everyone else is sitting out. And here's where we're talking about, right? Later that day, Jonathan, Saul's son, said to his armor bearer, "Come on, let's go over to the Philistine garrison patrol on the other side of the pass." But he didn't tell his father, right? Because this is where his father was at. Meanwhile, Saul was taking it easy under the pomegranate tree at the threshing floor on the edge of the town of Geba. And that in the midst of them being set up for war and the Philistines on the other side of the valley, ready to go to war, Saul is just kind of taking it easy, relaxing. And Jonathan is stuck between this, being loyal to his father versus being loyal to God. And God had called them as the people of Israel to rid the land of anyone who doesn't serve him. And that included the Philistines. So Jonathan said to his armor, "Look, we're going to go out and we're going to go to one of the garrisons. And if they tell us to come to them to fight, then we're going to go. And we're probably going to die. But if they tell us to stay right there as they come to us, then we're going to get out of there because God is not with us. And we're going to choose to live our life based on being loyal to God and what he has called us to do." So as he and his armor bearer, they get out and they, in the covert operation that they're in, they begin to look to see, and the Philistines say, "Come on over here, young Philistines, and we're gonna beat you up." And they knew in that moment, in their loyalty to God, that God had called them to that. And no matter what happened, be it death or be it success, that they were going to follow God. And if you read on in the story, you'll find that they went and they took out these 20 different Philistines. And as a result, at that moment, God sent an earthquake, and there was an earthquake. And it sent the rest of the Philistines into this kind of crazy stupor. And they started fighting each other, all because Jonathan and his armor bearer, right? All he does is hold the shield, doesn't even have a weapon, decided to be loyal to God and to take on this garrison. By all human respects, it was a crazy idea, a crazy plan, but their loyalty drove them to go out. I remember hearing a story once of a lighthouse, right? And a lighthouse is set up in this situation, usually by water, to be able to keep ships from crashing into the waves. And there's this one particular lighthouse that constantly had storms. And there was this man who had a son whose job it was to make sure that lighthouse was always lit. And this one particular storm was larger than most, and they found themselves in the situation where they had to go and relight the lighthouse, but it was going to be dangerous. And the son says to the father, Dad, we don't have to go out and do this. We don't have to risk our own lives. Right? But the loyalty that the father had to the people who relied upon him, he said this to his son. He says, we have to go out, son, but we don't have to come back. Right? And our loyalty drives us to sometimes do things that, might ask of us to give our lives. And isn't that really the faith that we're called to give our lives to Jesus, to lay our lives over? And I think somewhere inside of us, there is this kind of bend towards just living for something bigger than ourselves. When I look at my movie collection, right, I got all these movies of war movies, and it's these characters that, just abandon their own wants and desires for the sake of their loyalty to something bigger than themselves. And maybe it's just because I spent most of my life kind of being loyal to myself and always prone to just want to make decisions based on what's going to benefit me that applies to me. But that's the call of faith, is to give loyalty to God despite whatever and wherever that takes us. Because we have to go, church, but we don't have to come back. Because loyalty, it goes out when everyone else is taking it easy, just relaxing and resting under the trees. It tells us to get out and to go. And lastly, there's this idea of loyalty we see in Jonathan's life, where loyalty, it doesn't withhold anything when it comes to costing us everything. In Jonathan's life, Jonathan is set up to be, he is the prince, and he's set up to be the next king. So he finds himself in this dilemma where he has to choose between his father, who's now been looked over and rejected as king by God because of his actions, and his best friend, who now he finds out has been anointed and God has called to be the next king. And being loyal to one means having to abandon the other. And being loyal to David means that he's sacrificing his inheritance, sacrificing the throne, right? I mean, can you imagine being able to be the president of the United States? You know that it's coming. It's going to be gifted to you, and you just have to, because of the calling on your life, to lose it, to sacrifice it, to give it up, to lose ourselves. In 1 Samuel, it says this: Jonathan, Saul's son, visited David at Horesh and encouraged him in God. All right, this is David's on the run and fleeing for his life and hiding from Saul. And in the midst of that, Jonathan goes and visits him and wanted to encourage him. And he said to David, he said, don't despair. My father Saul can't lay a hand on you. You will be Israel's king, and I will be right at your side to help. All right, Jonathan shows this loyalty that's going to cost him his own future kingdom, his own future position, his future wealth. It's going to cost him everything. And he says, my loyalty to God demands that you, as the next anointed king of Israel, and as my friend, I'm going to choose to be at your side to help. And the irony of this statement, and that the result of Jonathan's loyalty, is that after this, he would go and go back to his father, and he serves the people of Israel as his father's still the king. And as they go to war, and he goes to war with his father Saul, before he even sees David as king, he dies in battle fighting the Philistines, honoring his father, because his father's called him to war, and he goes off to war. And he's loyal to the fact that God has Saul still as king at that time. And despite knowing that he's going to be eventually serving David and helping him, he still chooses his loyalty. Because his loyalty was not to Saul, and it wasn't even really to David, but it was to God. And that made him a better son for Saul, and it made him a better friend for David. Because he knows, and my father knows, that then the two of them made a covenant before God. And we don't really understand this that well, right? Because as we're becoming friends with people and then we decide, you know what, I really like this person, let's make a covenant, right, to be friends. It's not really something that we do. The closest that we get to that is in marriage, where we decide, right, this person of the opposite sex is going to be someone who I choose above everyone else, and I'm going to make a covenant with them. But the reality is we don't make covenants with our friends. And I wonder how many lost relationships are out there because we found it easier to just let go of our loyalty. Right, we decided to let our jealousy overcome us. And really that's what it was for me for most of my life. Right, with Phil and Tiffany, right? I was jealous that she was prettier and why should he's not making any moves? So, you know, the world belongs to those who are ambitious, right? But I see the same pattern all throughout my life of this jealousy of people having other things that I wanted and sometimes turning my back on relationships, some of my best friends, because I was jealous of what they had. And maybe, you know, a relationship that they had that I wanted, but it wasn't as good as the one that they had. So I allowed my jealousy to fester in my heart and ruin the relationship. And I wonder how many lost relationships we have as a result of misplaced loyalty, of lost loyalty. Because loyalty is this idea of where your love is, right? In Proverbs, the writer says this, don't lose your grip on love and loyalty. He ties these two together, that there's this connection between love and loyalty. When you love somebody, you're loyal to them. Or when you're loyal to somebody, then there's this love that's naturally there. And he tells us to tie these two words on your heart. Of all the two words he could have picked, he chose love and loyalty. Tie them on your hearts, around your neck, carve their initials on your heart, and earn a reputation for living well in God's eyes. How? By keeping your eyes on these two things. And it's going to give you a good reputation with God and with the people around you. Loyalty is where your love is. And really the heart of sin is loving anything more than you love God. And you see, Jonathan loved God more than anything else. And sometimes that love and that loyalty made it difficult to honor God, Saul, and to honor his friend David, but he found a way to do it because he loved God and he was loyal to his God. And it allowed him to be loyal to the people around him. And then 1 John gives us this kind of lasting message when it comes to love. He says, if anyone boasts that I love God, yet goes around hating his brother or sister, thinking nothing of it, he is a liar. Right? And John's talking about our relationships with the people around us. Because if he won't love the person that he can see, right, if he can't be loyal to the person that he can see, then how can he love the God? How can he be loyal to the God that he can't see? Because here's the command. He says the command that we have from Christ is blunt, it's simple, it's pretty straightforward. He says loving God, being loyal to God includes loving and being loyal to people. You've got to love both. You got to be loyal to both. This week I had a conversation with a young girl who's kind of been in and out of my life for as long as, ever since my first ministry position down in Florida. Her name was Mackenzie. Her name still is Mackenzie. And Mackenzie was this young girl who was kind of, you know, one of the first girls that I really felt I was making an impact on, not just there in Florida, but really like in my entire life up to that point, right, as a young 20-year-old. And Mackenzie was the type of person that was prone to kind of give herself over to destructive habits. She had scars all up and down her arms from cutting herself. She had parents that were a wreck, a dad who was alcoholic, and a mom kind of aloof and, you know, just absent-minded, not aware of what's going on. And gradually, you know, she came into the ministry and she gave herself over to following God and being a part of leadership. And as she got older and then I left, we kind of lost contact, but I began to see the same kind of pattern coming up, and giving herself just to all sorts of different relationships. And the next thing I heard, she got caught up in drugs and doing heroin. Again, just more destructive patterns in her life. And there was a period where she decided she wanted to get clean, and she was going to remove get herself out of the current situation. So she actually moved up to Binghamton and then up here to Syracuse. And we decided, you know what, we're gonna try to help her. And she stayed with my parents for a little while, and then she wound up moving in with us and staying with us for a little while. But you could just tell that it wasn't going to go well, because despite her saying she wanted to get clean, she still was kind of, breaking rules and doing other things that she wanted to do. And just after probably a short few weeks, maybe a month or two, she decides to just leave on her own because she doesn't want to submit to the rules, and she found herself back in the same cycle again. And I hadn't talked to her for years. And I mean, during that time, she had come here to Forward Point. She sat in the back, or she would come up in the top there when we met a few times when the power went out. And then we got reconnected. Her mom reached out to me and said, hey, Mackenzie's back in rehab, and she's in this long-term program, and it would really mean a lot to her if you reached out to her. Maybe you could send her a Bible. So I got a Bible, and I wrote in the Bible, and the only way she could talk is if she has quarters. So I sent her a roll of quarters and said, Mackenzie, we would love to hear from you, to know what's going on. And I sent the package away, not really knowing what was going to happen. And I got this phone call, a few days ago. And it was Mackenzie. And it was kind of a version of Mackenzie, right? Because I remember the voice of Mackenzie that was young and youthful, and all of a sudden this voice had kind of turned into this, almost like an old, rugged, worn out person, like the voice of a 60-year-old. And I talked to her on the phone, and she began to describe for me the things that had happened to her in her life post her leaving here in Syracuse. And she talked about getting caught up in heroin again. And she talked about having to dance to provide for her needs and the needs of her boyfriend, and then the needs of her fiance. Then her fiance got caught with drugs and is in prison. And then she was doing drugs with her fiance's boyfriend, and her fiance's boyfriend overdosed. And then when they came to the overdose, they saw all the drugs, and they wind up arresting her. And now she's in this program for 12 to 18 months through the Department of Correctional Facilities. And during this different parts of her story, you can hear the quarter kind of clunk in the machine, and she's got to put another quarter in. Or there's times where she had to call me back because once her change falls, if there's someone else waiting in line, she's got to give up her phone spot. So I'm getting the story through bits and pieces and through different chunks throughout the course of the rest of the evening. And by the end of the night, the one thing that will never relieve me is the fact that what she said is like, the only thing I'm looking for right now, Jimmy, is to know that you love me. Right now, that means more than anything else to me. The fact that I got this Bible, when just this week I was talking to my cellmate about reading a book in the Message translation of the Bible, and that's what you sent me. And now we have it to read together. Right, despite all these years of me turning my back on the generosity that you showed and the things that you gave, that you would be loyal, right? That you would still choose to love me despite all of these things that I've done. And then the next day I got a message from her mom, and her mom literally uttered those same exact words that right now Mackenzie, had just blew her away, that you would still choose to love her through that. That you would still choose to be loyal. And I'll be honest, it wasn't my loyalty to Mackenzie that allowed that to come out, but it was my loyalty to God and what He's called me to do. That despite however many times she turns her back or she decides to go her own way, I'm going to choose to continue to love her. Because really, that's all of our stories. Right? How many times have we turned our back on God? How many times have we chosen to go our own way? And while we were of no use to him, he gave his life for us. It was his loyalty to us in that state that drove him to a cross, that drove him to endure such brutal torture for us, for you, and for me. And in the same way, I feel like, there's relationships that are represented by each one of us here. Relationships that maybe we walked away from, or we just stopped responding to because they said something or they did something. And I believe with all my heart that it breaks God's heart to see his people, because the church, more than anything, it's known for the way that we eat our own. We abandon our own. When they're hurting, when they've made mistakes, we choose to kick them out to the road. And we've lost our sense of loyalty. How can we say that we love God who we can't see if we can't even be loyal to the person next to us who we can see? And it's going to probably hurt, but there's probably some conversations that need to happen when you leave here. Relationships that have grown cold for years. The text message thread is gone from your phone because it's self-deleted itself. But this morning, God wants to say, don't leave any chance to show that you're not loyal to that person, whoever it is, no matter what they've done to you. Doesn't mean that you have to put yourself back into an abusive situation or set yourself up to be taken advantage of again. That's not what we're talking about. But we're talking about turning our gaze back on God and say, God, you're calling me to be loyal to you first and foremost. And as I do that, God, what relationships around me do I need to make right? Not that they're going to be what they were before, but in the same way our relationship is restored, God, you would just allow the burden of this relationship to fall off as you restore the jealousy that drove a king mad and crazy. You would do a work in this relationship. Will you pray with me this morning? God, we thank you so much. We thank you that you are a God who are always making the first step towards us. You came down after us and you lived this life and you went after the people and you took the steps towards the cross, all for the fact that you wanted to restore your relationship with us. God, your loyalty to me and your loyalty to us, it just blows my mind. And God, we as a people, we've lost our sense of loyalty. We've allowed ourselves to be overtaken by the slogans of the day, and whichever one sounds better, or whichever one has more followers, and we jump on that bandwagon and we're loyal to that cause. But God, I would pray this morning that you would help us just to abandon the titles, to abandon the political Republican or Democrat, to abandon everything and align ourselves with you again, to be loyal to you again. And they got out of this redeemed relationship with you, you may begin to help us to be loyal to the people around us, to just simply love the people around us, despite what they can do for us, despite maybe what they've even done to us. We can choose to continue in love and loyalty. And you would help us to redeem this virtue again. And it would help us to set ourselves apart from the desires and the culture and the world around us. people would begin to wonder, why? How can you do that? So God, do this work in us with every relationship that's represented here this morning, that's coming to mind in the words that we're worried aren't going to be there when we start the conversation. God, I pray that you would just calm the nerves of every single person and just give them the faith to take just another step after another step, to just first pick up the phone and to dial the numbers and just let you take over the conversation. Because God, we want to be a people who are loyal to you, because we have to go, but we don't have to come back. So use this. God, we pray for Summer Sunday Fun Nights tonight again, that you would just help us to be your hands and feet in our community and to just love on everyone who's going to be there. Just thank you for everyone who sacrifices to help put it on, and just thank you for this family that we get together and we get to do these things, and it just seems like fun. We're grateful for you and what you're doing in our lives. I pray that you continue to do it. In your name we pray. Amen. Forward Point, we love you. Have a great week. Stay safe. If you need prayer for anything, we'd love to pray for you if there are things that are going on. Obviously, it's been a little weird with masks and all that, but if you're wearing a mask and I'm wearing a mask, Stephen's wearing a mask, we would love to pray for you. We ask you wear your mask as you leave, and feel free to talk, but just be respectful of everyone around. And if you can come back out tonight down just the street, a couple blocks, we'd love to have you. Some good food's going to be there, and I guarantee you some good times had by all right? Love you. Have a great week.